You ever wonder why the person who seems so distant, so unattached, suddenly starts thinking about you when you're long gone? Why does someone who once pushed you away suddenly start obsessing over you? It's not a coincidence. It's human psychology at play. And when it comes to avoidance, it's even more predictable. Avoidants aren't wired like everyone else. They don't process emotions in real time. They push love away, not because they don't feel it, but because feeling it terrifies them. Intimacy equals risk. Closeness equals vulnerability. And for someone with an avoidant attachment style, that is the ultimate threat. So when you were in their life, they kept you at arm's length. But when you're gone, that's when the real emotions start creeping in. Here's what happens. The moment you go into no contact, you remove the one thing they took for granted, your presence. And at first, they feel relief, freedom, space. They tell themselves it's exactly what they needed. But that's just their mind doing what it does best, avoiding. Then something shifts because the brain doesn't process loss immediately. They start replaying moments, revisiting conversations, and suddenly the version of you that they once resisted becomes the version they crave. And here's the kicker. Avoidants need control. They're used to being the ones distancing themselves. But when you take control by disappearing, it creates an imbalance. Now they're no longer running the show. That unsettles them. And what happens when the mind feels like it's losing something it once had? It starts obsessing, it starts idealizing. Think about it. People don't crave what's readily available. They crave what's scarce. And no contact turns you into something rare. Before, they knew they could reach you. But now, you're gone. And suddenly, their avoidant brain flips the narrative. The relationship they once felt suffocated by, now it looks like the best thing they ever had. But here's where most people go wrong. They see this obsession as love. Listen to me, this isn't love. It's fear, it's nostalgia, it's the emotional delay catching up with them. They're not reaching out because they suddenly understand how much you mean to them. They're reaching out because they don't like the feeling of losing you. And if you rush back the moment they do, the cycle repeats. So what do? You stay focused on you. You don't break no contact. You don't validate their fears by giving them easy access again. You let them sit with those emotions, let them process what it actually means to lose you. Because true transformation doesn't happen when you chase. It happens when you step back and let them meet you where you are. Remember this, no contact isn't about getting them back. It's about reclaiming your power. And when you do that, you stop being an option and start becoming the standard. Avoidants don't struggle with attraction. They struggle with intimacy. This is where most people get it wrong. They think that because an avoidant pulls away, they aren't interested. But that's not the case at all. Attraction isn't the issue. In fact, they may have felt a deep, undeniable connection with you. The problem is what comes after attraction. Closeness, vulnerability, emotional dependence. These are the things that trigger their internal alarms. When an avoidant meets someone they truly like, they feel the pull just like anyone else. The difference is, instead of leaning in, they instinctively lean out. It's not that they don't want connection. It's that connection brings discomfort. They've been wired, often since childhood, to associate intimacy with something dangerous. Maybe they had parents who smothered them with love, but withdrew it the moment they misbehaved. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotions weren't acknowledged, so they learned to suppress their own. Either way, their subconscious mind equates closeness with loss of freedom, control, or even rejection. So what do? They keep you at a distance. They give just enough to maintain the connection, but not enough to make it feel secure. This push-pull dynamic isn't a game they're playing to manipulate you. It's an ingrained coping mechanism. They fear engulfment just as much as they fear abandonment, so they hover in a space where they can feel attached without feeling overwhelmed. But here's the catch. This only works when you're still in the picture. The moment you go into no contact, everything shifts. That comfortable middle ground they maintained vanishes. Now they aren't in control anymore. There's no slow fade, no gradual detachment. You're just gone. And suddenly their feelings don't have an outlet. Avoidants process their emotions in isolation, which means they don't realize what they feel until there's nothing left to distract them from it. They told themselves they needed space, and now they have it, but instead of relief, something else starts creeping in: uncertainty. Without you in their life, they start remembering the moments that matter. But here's where their psychology plays an interesting trick on them. When you were present, their mind focused on the threat of closeness. But once you're absent, their mind starts filtering out those fears and highlighting the positives. They begin idealizing the connection, replaying memories in their head, thinking about what they should have said or done differently. The very thing that made them pull away, emotional intensity, now becomes the thing they crave. Attraction never left. It was always there, buried beneath layers of avoidance. The only difference now is that there's nothing suppressing it anymore. And because avoidants are used to being the ones distancing themselves, when the roles reverse, when you're the one who disappears, their brain panics. What once felt suffocating now feels like something they can't have, and scarcity breeds desire. When you walk away, something powerful happens inside the mind of an avoidant. At first, they feel relief. They tell themselves that space is exactly what they needed, that the pressure is finally off. They go about their life enjoying the solitude they've always craved. But what they don't realize is that your absence is triggering something much deeper than they consciously understand. Avoidants are wired to suppress emotions, not process them. They push feelings down, disconnect from their own needs, and convince themselves they don't need anyone. But this is all an illusion. Just because they don't express their emotions doesn't mean those emotions aren't there. They've just gotten really good at delaying them. And that delay is why no contact has such a powerful effect. At first, an avoidant thinks they are fine, but as days and weeks pass, a shift occurs. What they once dismissed now starts creeping into their mind unexpectedly. The reason? Their core fear of abandonment is being triggered. They may not have realized it when you were around, but the connection you shared provided them with a sense of security, even if they resisted it. Now that security is gone, and instead of feeling freedom, they start feeling uncertainty. Avoidants have a complicated relationship with attachment. On one hand, they crave connection just like anyone else, but on the other hand, they fear losing themselves in it. When you were in their life, they reassured themselves that they could leave at any moment. That knowledge kept them comfortable, but no contact takes that option away from them. You aren't just distant, you're truly gone. And because avoidants struggle with direct confrontation of their emotions, they don't immediately understand what's happening. Instead of feeling sad right away, they go about their life as usual, unaware that something inside them is shifting. But then little reminders of you start appearing. A song, a place you visited together, a random thought about something you once said. Each time, their brain makes a connection. And because they process emotions on a delayed timeline, these small triggers start adding up. What started as relief now turns into an underlying sense of discomfort. This is when obsession begins. The avoidant mind hates feeling out of control, and right now, that's exactly how they feel. They thought they were the ones who had control over the relationship, but your absence proves otherwise. They can no longer access you whenever they want, and this realization stirs something primal within them. The person they once took for granted is now slipping away, and suddenly the loss feels real. What's happening is simple. The fear of abandonment that they buried deep inside is now fully activated. They may not show it outwardly, but inside they are replaying every interaction, questioning their choices and wondering if they made a mistake. This is the power of no contact. It forces them to confront the very emotions they spent their entire life running from. An avoidant doesn't process emotions in the heat of the moment. While others feel loss immediately after a breakup or separation, avoidants don't. Instead, they suppress, compartmentalize, and distract themselves. They tell themselves it wasn't that deep, that they needed space, that it was for the best. They move forward logically, keeping themselves occupied with work, hobbies, or casual interactions. But just because they don't react right away doesn't mean they won't react at all. Their emotions are simply waiting beneath the surface, and over time, something happens that they can't ignore. Distance turns into longing. When you enforce no contact, you remove the constant presence of familiarity. And for an avoidant, that absence doesn't register immediately as a loss, it registers as relief. But over time, the human mind starts filling in the gaps. The brain has a funny way of filtering memories, especially when something or someone is no longer accessible. Instead of remembering the stress, the arguments, or the fears that made them pull away, they start replaying the best moments, the laughter, the connection, the depth of your presence in their life. And because avoidants don't process emotions in real time, this idealization process takes hold without them realizing it. Avoidants are highly independent and often believe they are better off alone. But here's the paradox. When they finally get the space they thought they wanted, they begin to feel the effects of true solitude. It's not just physical distance, it's emotional disconnection. You're no longer texting, calling, or checking in, and this lack of contact forces their mind to dwell on what once was. At first, they brush it off as nostalgia, but then the thoughts become more persistent. They start wondering what you're doing, whether you've moved on, whether you still think about them. And this is when obsession begins to take hold. Because avoidants struggle with emotional regulation, they rely on avoidance to keep themselves from feeling overwhelmed. But now that you're gone, there's nothing left to avoid. The emotional weight they refuse to acknowledge is now fully present. Instead of feeling indifferent, they start idealizing the relationship. The moments that once made them feel trapped now feel like a missing piece in their life. They romanticize the connection, remembering you in a way that exaggerates your best qualities. It's not an accurate reflection of reality. It's their mind's way of coping with the loss. The irony is, this longing wouldn't have happened if you had stayed in contact. If you had kept reaching out, kept trying to connect, they would have continued pushing you away. But because you disappeared completely, they had no choice but to sit with their thoughts, and those thoughts over time transform into an obsessive curiosity about you. The same person they once distanced themselves from is now the person they can't stop thinking about. Not because they suddenly understand their feelings, but because distance has created the illusion that they lost something irreplaceable. Avoidants operate from a deep need for control. Their entire attachment style is built around the belief that closeness threatens their independence. When they are the ones creating distance, they feel safe. They dictate the pace of the relationship, pulling back when things get too intense and re-engaging when they feel comfortable. This gives them a sense of security because they believe they are the ones in control of their emotions, their space, and ultimately the relationship itself. But the moment you go into no contact, that dynamic is shattered. They were used to being the ones who decided how much closeness was acceptable. They set the boundaries, controlled the pace, and determined when to engage or withdraw. But when you remove yourself entirely, you take that power away from them. Suddenly, they are no longer in the driver's seat. They no longer have the option of pulling away because you're already gone. And that shift, even if they don't recognize it consciously, begins to gnaw at them. At first, they convince themselves that nothing has changed. They tell themselves they wanted space and now they have it. They may even feel a temporary sense of relief as if they successfully maintain their independence. But slowly, something unsettling begins to creep in. The realization that they no longer have access to you. Before, they always had a safety net. Even if they weren't actively reaching out, they knew you were there. Maybe you were texting them, checking in, or showing signs that you were still emotionally available. But now, silence. And this is where their need for control starts to work against them. Avoidants do not like uncertainty. They like to believe that they can predict people's behaviors and responses. But when you break the cycle and remove yourself completely, they are left in unfamiliar territory. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know if you've moved on. And worst of all, they don't know if they still have a hold on you. That unknown factor creates a level of discomfort they aren't used to dealing with. The more they sit with that uncertainty, the more their mind starts searching for answers. They begin to wonder if they misjudged the relationship, if they underestimated your value, if they made a mistake by pulling away. And because they are not used to feeling out of control, their thoughts spiral into obsession. The relationship they once took for granted now becomes something they can't stop thinking about. They don't necessarily want the relationship back, at least not yet, but they want the reassurance that you are still there. They want to know that if they wanted to re-engage, they could. But when you remain silent, that option disappears, and the harder it is to access you, the more desirable you become in their mind. The control they once had is now in your hands, and nothing triggers an avoidant more than realizing they no longer have the power to decide when and how the relationship unfolds. Avoidants don't experience loss the way others do. When a relationship ends, a securely attached person feels the emotional impact almost immediately. They process the grief, work through their emotions, and eventually move forward. But an avoidant doesn't work that way. Their natural defense mechanism is to suppress, not process. They push emotions down so they don't have to deal with them in the moment. They tell themselves they're fine, that moving on is easy, that they didn't need the relationship in the first place. And for a while, they believe it. But emotions don't just disappear. They don't vanish because someone refuses to acknowledge them. They sit beneath the surface, waiting for the right trigger to bring them up. And that's exactly why no contact has such a profound effect on an avoidant. It forces them into a delayed emotional reaction. At first, an avoidant may feel relief after the breakup or separation. The pressure of intimacy is gone. The space they craved is finally there. They tell themselves they made the right choice, that they needed distance, that they are better off alone. They may even enjoy the solitude, filling their time with distractions, new hobbies, or surface-level relationships that don't require emotional depth. But then time starts to pass. The distractions become less effective. The silence becomes louder. And without realizing it, they begin to feel the very emotions they had been suppressing all along. It starts subtly. Maybe they see something that reminds them of you, a song, a place you visited together, an inside joke that no one else would understand. At first, they brush it off, telling themselves it's just a passing thought. But then it happens again and again. The memories begin to resurface, not all at once, but in waves, creeping into their mind when they least expect it. Because avoidants don't process emotions in real time, they experience nostalgia differently. They don't sit and dwell on the past immediately after a breakup. Instead, they revisit it piece by piece, and over time, those fragments of memory start to take shape. They begin to see the relationship in a new light, not as something that suffocated them, but as something that added meaning to their life. They remember the good moments, the laughter, the connection, and because they have already distanced themselves from the stress or conflicts that may have existed, they start idealizing what they lost. This is when obsession begins. Their mind starts questioning everything. Did they make the right choice? Did they push away something valuable? Have they truly moved on, or are they just running from their emotions? The irony is these thoughts wouldn't have developed if you had stayed in their life trying to reconnect or chase them. The emotional delay happens precisely because no contact gives them the space to feel what they initially suppressed. And once those emotions hit, they can no longer ignore them. The relationship they thought they left behind is now the very thing occupying their thoughts, and they can't figure out why they can't just shake it off. When something becomes scarce, its value increases. This isn't just a relationship dynamic, it's human psychology. People crave what they can't have, and avoidants are no exception. They may spend a relationship pushing you away, creating distance, and convincing themselves that they don't need closeness. But the moment you take that closeness away entirely, something shifts in their mind. Suddenly, the thing they once took for granted now feels unattainable, and that scarcity triggers a deep sense of desire at the start. They don't feel the loss. Avoidants are wired to detach, to tell themselves they're better off alone, to believe that their independence is more important than emotional intimacy. When you leave and go into no contact, their immediate reaction isn't to chase, it's to rationalize. They convince themselves that this was inevitable, that they were always going to need space, that they prefer solitude over emotional entanglement. But all of this is just their defense mechanism at work. As time goes on, something unexpected happens. What once felt like freedom starts to feel like emptiness. The relationship they minimized in their mind is now a relationship they no longer have access to. You're not checking in. You're not reaching out. You've completely removed yourself from their life. And that absence starts to create a sense of unease. Before, they had the option to engage or disengage at will. Now that option is gone. You aren't just distant, you're unavailable. And here's where the scarcity effect truly kicks in. When something is always within reach, the mind doesn't assign it much value. It's predictable, expected, and easy to overlook. But when something suddenly disappears, it creates uncertainty, and uncertainty fuels desire. The avoidant may not have fully appreciated your presence when you were always there, but now that you're missing from their life, they begin to feel a sense of urgency. It's not just that they miss you, it's that they realize they no longer have the control they once did. This realization creates a mental paradox. Avoidants crave space, but they also fear abandonment. They want independence, but they don't want to feel like they've been left behind. When they pushed you away, they assumed you'd always be there in some capacity. But now that you're not, their brain begins to reframe the situation. Instead of focusing on why they needed space, they begin to focus on what they lost. And the more they try to suppress these thoughts, the stronger they become. That's why no contact is so powerful. It's not about manipulation. It's about breaking the cycle. If you had stayed in their life trying to reconnect, they would have continued keeping you at arm's length. But by disappearing completely, you trigger their deepest fear. The fear that they miscalculated, that they lost something truly valuable. And in that scarcity, their mind turns you into the very thing they once resisted. Something they now desperately want, but can no longer easily have. Avoidants don't fall in love through presence. They fall in love through absence. They don't realize what they feel when you're there, but they can't ignore it when you're gone. Their attachment style makes them resist intimacy, but that resistance doesn't mean a lack of emotions. It means suppressed emotions, and no contact forces those emotions to the surface in a way nothing else can. At first, they rationalize your absence. They tell themselves they wanted this, that it was for the best, that they are fine. But as time passes, their mind starts working against them. The control they once had disappears. The relationship they minimize becomes something they can't stop thinking about. The space they crave turns into something they never expected. Emptiness. What makes an avoidant obsess over you isn't that you chase them, it's that you don't. It's that you break the pattern. It's that for once they are forced to sit with their own emotions instead of running from them. The person they pushed away is now out of reach, and that scarcity makes them reframe everything. No contact isn't about playing games, it's about self-respect. It's about giving them the space they think they want so they can realize it's not what they needed. And by the time they do, the power dynamic has shifted completely. Now it's not you who's chasing them. It's their own mind that won't let them forget you.